Claire was 22 years old, full of the kind of hope and excitement about the future that only youth can bring. She was passionate about psychology, fully immersed in her studies at the University of Washington in Seattle. To her, understanding the human mind wasn't just an academic pursuit. It was a calling. She wanted to help people, especially those who felt lonely and marginalized. Her immigrant parents had struggled to find acceptance in their new life in the United States, and Claire often thought about how she could make the world a better place for people like them. Her dream was to create a safe space for anyone in need of support and guidance. By day, Claire interned at a community center, assisting therapists and psychologists during sessions. She organized files, took notes, and observed the intricate work of helping others heal. By night, she worked as a waitress at a bustling restaurant to pay for her tuition. Her schedule was exhausting, but Claire never complained. Her bright smile and boundless energy lit up any room she walked into, and it wasn't long before she became a favorite among her co-workers and customers. There was one thing Claire loved most about her evenings: the walk to the bus stop after her shift. For her, it was a time to relax and reflect. She loved the crisp Seattle night air, the way the streetlights cast soft glows on the pavement, and the quiet hum of the city around her. It was her time to feel free, to let her thoughts wander. That night, the night that changed everything, Claire was leaving the restaurant after a long shift. She'd just finished wiping down tables and stacking chairs when a coworker called out, "Hey, want a ride? It's freezing out there." Claire shook her head with a warm smile. "Thanks, but I don't mind the walk." She liked her routine, her little slice of peace. Pulling her coat tight around her, she stepped into the parking lot. The wind was brisk, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. As she walked, she noticed a tall man approaching from the shadows. His arm was in a cast, and he looked a little unsure of himself. "Excuse me," he said, his voice soft and hesitant. "Could you help me? I dropped some books by my car. It's just over there." Something about the way he looked at her made Claire pause. There was something off, but she brushed it aside. He probably just needs help, she thought, and Claire had always believed in kindness. They walked toward his car. The closer they got, the more uneasy Claire felt. His gaze seemed too focused, too intense. She tried to calm herself. Don't overthink it. But as they reached the car, his expression shifted. The timid, awkward demeanor vanished, replaced by something cold and predatory. Before she could react, he grabbed her. His hand clamped over her mouth, his other arm pinning hers with a force she couldn't overcome. Claire's mind raced. She thrashed, kicked, tried to scream, but his grip was iron. Everything she'd learned in that self-defense class felt like a distant memory, swallowed by panic. Within moments, he shoved her into the car. The door slammed shut, and darkness engulfed her. When Claire came to, the world around her felt like a nightmare. She was in a small, windowless room, lit by a single flickering bulb. Her wrists and ankles were bound, every movement sending sharp pain through her body. Fear surged through her, threatening to drown her. She fought to steady her breathing. Closing her eyes, she focused on the faces of her family, her friends, the people she helped at the community center. Stay calm. Think. She clung to those thoughts, finding strength in them. She began scanning the room, her eyes darting to every corner. There had to be something, anything she could use to escape. As she looked, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from outside the door. Then came the scrape of something being dragged. Claire froze. He was close. She could feel the cold terror creeping up her spine. Not long after, he entered. This time, the cast was gone. His face was emotionless, devoid of any humanity. Claire didn't look at him directly, focusing instead on her breathing. She counted silently, grounding herself. 1, 2, 3. Stay calm. It was something she had learned in her studies, a trick she often suggested to others. Gathering courage, she spoke. "What's your name?" Her voice trembled, but the words came out steady enough. He stopped, visibly caught off guard. He didn't answer, but for a brief second, something flickered in his expression. Claire noticed. It wasn't much, but it was a crack in his cold facade, and cracks, she thought, could grow. In the days that followed, Claire observed him closely. He had patterns, routines. He came and went at specific times, sometimes leaving objects lying around. One night, after he left, she spotted a screwdriver on the floor, half hidden near a table. Her heart raced. This could be it. With painstaking effort, she began working on the ropes binding her wrists. Her fingers were raw, her body trembling from exhaustion. But she didn't stop. Hours passed, and then, finally, she was free. A surge of hope flooded through her. This is my chance. When the man returned, Claire was ready. She struck him with the screwdriver, catching him off guard and wounding his arm. As he stumbled back in pain, she bolted. Barefoot, she sprinted through the dark, unfamiliar corridors of the house. She could hear his shouts, the fury in his voice as he chased after her. But Claire didn't look back. She found a door. It was unlocked. The cool night air hit her face like a blessing. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt free. She ran, her bare feet slapping against the ground, tears streaming down her face. In the distance, she saw the faint outline of a road. If she could just reach it, someone might see her. Someone might help. But just as hope swelled in her chest, she heard him behind her. The blow came fast, knocking her to the ground. Claire screamed, twisting and kicking as he lunged at her. The two of them struggled, their bodies tangled in a brutal fight. She clawed at his face, managing to scratch him deeply. For a moment, she thought she had the upper hand. She shoved him back and scrambled to her feet. But he was faster. He grabbed her again, dragging her back down. The fight felt endless. Every muscle in Claire's body burned as she bit, kicked, and struck with everything she had. At one point, she grabbed a rock and swung it at him, hitting his shoulder. It wasn't enough. He overpowered her, his grip tightening as her strength waned. Finally, in one cruel, calculated move, he silenced her. The forest grew quiet. The only sound left was the rustle of leaves in the wind. Claire's disappearance was quickly noticed by her family and friends. search for her became a major story, with news outlets covering every development. Weeks later, her body was found near the road she had so desperately tried to reach. For those who loved her, it was devastating. But there was one thing they held on to. Claire had never stopped fighting. Her story sparked change. In her community, new programs were created to support women. Safety measures were improved, and awareness campaigns about violence against women gained momentum. Claire became a symbol of resilience, her courage inspiring others to stand against the darkness. As for her kidnapper, he was never found. Police uncovered the hidden cove where Claire had been kept, but there were no traces of him. It was the start of something even more sinister. Claire, tragically, was only the first.